What's up, BCI fam? Welcome to our first episode of the BCI podcast. We're really excited. This is something me and Andy have talked about for many moons, and we're really excited to get on here and be able to actually dive into a lot of the topics that we just don't have to talk, the time to talk about in the gym. So that being said, Andy, kick us off.
So this is our little makeshift podcast studio that we're actually going to put some effort into making better. But like Tate said, we've talked about this so much, we didn't want to slow down this process anymore. So we put together this podcast for you guys. This is not going to be something that we launch all over the country, or that's not the intent of it. Okay, we may make it available, but the whole purpose of this podcast is for you guys to get to know us, get to know your coaches better, and then get the questions answered that are hard to discuss in passing during session. What I have found is there are a lot of things that as coaches we might assume you guys know or are aware of, and that simply may not be true. So this is a great opportunity for us to kind of close the gap on some of the things that you might need a better understanding of. One of the things, though, that we thought would be valuable, and this is kind of the story behind all businesses, they all have like an origin story of like how the brand got started. And there are a lot of people who will listen to this that may have no idea how we got started. There are quite a few members of the gym who have been with us years and years. I mean, there's 2 members that I can think of that have been with us over 15 years. So they've kind of watched me grow up and watched the business grow up. And so yeah, that's what me and Tate talked about, is today we'll kind of go through the origin story of how I got started and how we got here. And then I thought it'd be valuable to kind of paint the picture of what we're going to be doing in the future as well. Mm-hmm. So that sound like a good start to you?
Yeah, I'm down.
Okay.
I'm down.
So my entire life, I think I was infatuated with being jacked. Mm-hmm. Like I would love to say it was like the training industry, but that's just not true. Yeah. I was like most young kids that grew up in the 80s. I just wanted to be jacked. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be Hulk Hogan. I wanted to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. I wanted to be Sylvester Stallone. And man, what a great era for a young boy to grow up in. I mean, it was G.I. Joe. It was awesome. And one of my first memories of like anything strength training related would be my dad had this little weight set that he kept downstairs, and you know, he would do some lifting every now and then. And I just remember watching him do it and be like, man, that's what I want to do. And then, as we got into sports, I got real lucky when I went to high school. There's a lot of stories I could go in there, so I'll stay on track. And I went to 3 high schools. I was so lucky that at all 3 high schools, I had a strength coach. That was so rare back then. Like, it didn't exist. Yeah,
like, still doesn't really exist.
Right, still hardly exists. But it was so wild that at all 3 high schools I went to, I had a strength coach. And they were all 3 very influential in my life. And the idea of being able to do something like this for a career was probably planted in my head by my dad. One day on the way to DeMatha High School, which was the first high school I went to, I was really into basketball and in ball handling specifically. And he said something to me that was like, you might be able to do something like that for a living one day, like teaching people ball handling. Mm-hmm. And to that point, this is like when computers are becoming a thing. Like, that's what you're supposed to go do. You go into like computer sciences or something. So that was the first thing that planted a seed. Like, maybe I can do something that's a little different. Through playing sports, I did heavily invest in weight training and got really strong. And all this is relevant, I hope, for the people listening, because most people's stories start out, it's like, I went to college, I got a degree, and then I did an internship, and then I get a job. That's just layers. Just wasn't my reality. Yeah. And so at 16 years old, I end up having a child. And that also kind of smacked me in the face and made me realize, like, I have to start figuring out how to get my stuff together. Mm-hmm. It took me many years to do that, but it did plant the seed. And I was going to the gym at this point. Like, I'm going to the gym every day after school. And a couple years later, I ended up meeting a guy at a local Gold's Gym who owned a company called HBI Fitness, Health, Body, and Image. And he had a similar background to me. He had been in trouble as a kid. He had a kid at a young age. but I saw this guy who had he had exclusivity contracts at all the Gold's gyms in the Washington, D.C. area. So there's two guys, John and Kirk Galliani. They owned all of corporate licensing for Gold's gyms. They just so happened to be in the Maryland, D.C. area where I grew up. Eric, who owned HBI, met these guys and negotiated a deal where he had exclusivity of all the personal training at all the Gold's gyms in the Washington, D.C. area. So at least the ones that were attached to corporate. So he had Waldorf, Maryland, Greenbelt, Maryland, Roslyn, Clarendon, Capitol Hill, Van Ness, and probably a couple others. But this was so impactful for me because I was probably 18 by then. I'm just a knucklehead, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. And I meet this guy that has made all the same mistakes I made, who's obviously very successful at this point. And my way of qualifying that is he drove a Range Rover. And, when you drive through D.C., the statue of Iwo Jima, right? There's some condos right behind there. And he lived in those condos. And that's how I knew he was successful. Yeah. And I was like, if it works for him, it'll work for me. So he took me under his wing and hired me, kind of got me my first training certification, and very quickly realized like I had no problem like hustling, and basically put me through a certification to become the Director of Nutritional Services. Again, that sounds fancy. Basically, it means they taught me how to use this software that attached to a body fat measuring thing, and it printed out kind of very antiquated diets. But I was traveling around to his locations, basically teaching the other nutrition techs how to use this software. And that process was big for me because it allowed me to dream a little bit, driving around the Beltway, and was like, I might be able to do something like this. And a series of events happened. I had a close friend killed.
I found this on the web for 2 events happened. Check it out.
Cam, we might need to cut that out.
Is that your phone?
Yeah, I don't know why Siri.
Just trying to be a special guest.
Yeah, I don't know what's up there. Where was I at with that?
Series of events.
Okay, yeah, series of events. We might want to pick it up there, Cam. Yeah. A series of events happened where basically I had a friend that was killed. I had a couple friends go to prison, and there was some other things that happened. It was very obvious to me that the writing was on the wall and that I needed to get out of there. And at this point, I had zero game plan of what I was going to do. But me and my daughter's mother at that time, who I was with my oldest child, we just kind of overnight packed everything. We were living in the projects down in Indian Head, Maryland. So anything in Alabama was going to be better. Mm-hmm. And I thought I was rich when I moved here because you could get an apartment for like $800 a month and it had a pool. I was like, this is amazing. Like that was definitely not going to happen where I was living. Yeah. And but I got out here, and my dad, who worked on the Arsenal, got me this like 3rd shift job, babysitting and managing computers. And I don't really know how long I made it in that job, but it was painful from the beginning. But I happened to meet a guy who like was working on his degree and building a web page as part of his degree or a project. And I told him like I've always wanted to start a training company. And he was like, well, we can use that kind of as like my project. Mm-hmm. So he started kind of building a website for a business that didn't exist, but it again got me thinking about what I would want it to be like. And long story short, I just get to the end of the rope with the 3rd shift job. Mm-hmm. It's destroying me. At this point, I had told my daughter's mother that it just wasn't going to work out. And she had unfortunately taken my oldest daughter back to Maryland. So I really, at this point, it's like I got nothing to lose. Life is kind of miserable right now. I'm going to do the intelligent thing and just start a business. Mm-hmm. So luckily, I had read some books, and I had some good people in my corner at that time who could like help me with the bookkeeping. And I just literally went to the old Gold's Gym, showed them my personal training certification that I still had. I told them I would get insurance. I didn't have it at that point in time. Ironically, they weren't even asking for insurance. Mm-hmm. And I asked him, how do you become a trainer there? And he was like, well, it's like $200 a month. And I was like, oh, okay. So I quit my job. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm going to figure this out. And within a week, I started filling up my books very fast. And I started to realize that this area was a little bit behind when it came to fitness and just in general, just the things I learned how to do working at the gyms in the Washington, D.C. area. Like nobody was teaching the people that worked at the gyms here how to do those things. So I had this unfair advantage when it came to like prospecting and selling and those things. And I mean, I don't know how long it took, but I'll just say rather fast, I kind of took over that gym. And I had a client at that time. I had two clients. One is a guy named Kevin Weber, who I'll shout out for forever. He's a business guy here in town. But Kevin hired me, and he treated me like somebody that had potential to run a business, not just like a dumb trainer. He didn't look at me like a kid the way I felt a lot of people did. There's a couple other people that I could mold into that as well. Tim Fisk, who's a member here still. Tony Osani, who was a member here up until recently. They treated me like a man when I was really a boy. And that really helped me figure out how to become the man I really wanted to be. But I had this other client named Rich, and Rich was he didn't live here all the time. He was here working for Motorola as one of their lawyers, and he was working at some law firm or with them. And I told him, about what was going on at the gyms in the Washington D.C. area, how Eric had taken over all the Gold's gyms, and he was like, "Man, well, you should think about doing that." And I was like, "Well, I don't even know where to start." So I started, my office, everybody would tell you for years, was Books A Million on 72. I treated that like my office. I would sit there all day, read as many books as I can, and just work on things. Now, my way of working on things at that moment was borrowing napkins from the coffee shop and writing out thoughts on these napkins. That became my first PowerPoint presentation because I didn't know how to use PowerPoint. I built it on napkins and then had this girl that I started dating help me basically dump it all into PowerPoint. And with Rich's help, what I did is I went to the owner of Gold's Gym and I said, "Hey, look, I'm paying you $200 a month. There's about 5 other trainers in here doing that. You're not making any money and your membership base is confused. You got one guy doing jazzercise. You got one guy that's a bodybuilder. You got one guy building trampoline workouts in. And that's just not good for your customer base. There's no unifying training system." And he was intrigued by my idea, and I proposed a revenue share with him, but he had to give me exclusivity over the gym, which he agreed to do, which was kind of like my first business win. And then shortly thereafter, I figured out how to do this with the Riviera Fitnesses in town, which at that time were not co-ed. There was 2 female gyms. So I did really good at like, oh man, I've had some success. The problem is I had no idea what to do with any of that. And quite frankly, I started a business out of survival. It wasn't like, again, like you go to school, you think about what you want to do, you get your degree in that field. So I'm kind of just figuring this out as I go. And so with those successes also came a lot of mistakes and failures. Luckily, I get to benefit from those now because I made a lot of mistakes during that time. But again, was pretty successful pretty fast, at least as far as like making money and filling up my books. And this all happened from around probably 2000 to 2005. 2005, I had a chance meeting with who would become the head coach at Madison Academy football. And at that point, sport performance training was not even a thing. Like, it really wasn't. I mean, maybe I'd probably trained a handful of athletes just because I was interested in it leading up to 2005, but it really wasn't the industry that it is now. And I recognized this, and because of my background and just getting in a lot of trouble as a kid, I recognized that if I could somehow intervene in this process of growing up and be the mentor in these kids' lives, I could keep them from falling into a lot of the same traps I did. And that was pivotal for me because that actually gave purpose to the job, which was severely lacking before. It was just like, I got to make money.
Yeah.
I got child support to pay. I got to do stuff. So this gave purpose to the job. And I was really that was exciting for me. But the problem with it was now I got to figure out how to train athletes. And I didn't want to train adults anymore. So long story short, I kind of gave up these sweetheart deals that I had at these gyms. I rolled the dice and started at Madison Academy by running a speed camp. Now, this speed camp is probably the first speed camp ever ran in this town, or one of the first for sure. It blew up, and it went really, really well. And I had actually made enough money that summer to get me through for a couple months. And I was just figuring out, what am I going to do? And I went to the basically administration there and was like, hey, look, here's the deal. You guys need a strength coach. I know you don't have the budget to do that. But if you'll let me run my speed camp and you'll let me train athletes out of your weight room from this school and other schools, you don't got to pay me. And they were like, bet. Because I was training, with this camp, I was already attracting kids from other schools. Mm-hmm. So this, I don't think anybody at MA would say this, but I think they recognized that it could also be a recruiting tool to where I was getting some of the best kids to come over and work with me, and now they would see what MA had to offer by way of the campus. Mm-hmm. Now, at that time, to be clear, they didn't have much to offer from a weight room standpoint. Madison Academy is one of the best. I mean, dude, it's one of the best weight rooms
remember that old
around.
weight room.
Yeah, when I got there, it was basically a universal machine in the middle.
About the size of this room?
Yeah, about the size of this room. And we ended up actually buying a bunch of old stuff from Gold's Gym that we took over there. And but I got to MA, and this was a big, hard switch in my mind. It's like, now I am going to focus on just being a strength coach, just being sport performance, and I'm going to build a business around this. And really, I really didn't care about the money at all, quite frankly. It was all about, I have to become a really good coach. Like, that is going to be, if I'm going to be respected in the sport performance world, it ain't going to be because of my bank account. It'll be because of my pedigree as a coach, my command of the science, the material, the programming, and my ability to impact and influence athletes. And I felt way more qualified for that than I had my previous venture. Mm-hmm. And that was big for me, man. It was it was big in a lot of ways. And what it allowed me to do was test out the business models that I was studying and learning about in essentially an overhead-free environment. And I just didn't care that it was kind of messy and nasty. Like, I've told you the story. I was
about to ask you if you wanted to bring that story
I've told stories like, I talk to all these gym owners now, and they're like, man, I'm embarrassed of my gym. It's not real nice. And I'm like, listen, man, I used to sit in Madison Academy's locker room with jock straps and football helmets. I mean, smelling like, if you've ever been in a football locker room, you know the smell I'm talking about.
They're gross.
I would take one folding chair and put it in front of me, and I would have another folding chair. Sometimes I had a whiteboard, sometimes I didn't. And I would sell people on why they should let me train their kid in that environment. And that was really big for me because I had to sell the outcome that I believed I could provide. I sure as heck wasn't selling the amenities and the facility, right? So that was big, and I got to trial, including things that were like really taboo back then, like electronic funds transfer. Like, I was doing that back in 2006 out of a funky MA locker room because that's what I had learned was the best way to create, a healthy business. Mm-hmm. And I started thinking about organizing groups and how would you do this. And I talked about this recently on a podcast that I was interviewed on, but at every turn there, I didn't really rely on like any business knowledge. I didn't have a whole lot of business knowledge. I mean, I knew some stuff, but I relied on my understanding of strength and conditioning to design a business that would actually get results for adults and athletes as a whole. And so that was also a head coach came over there named Eric Koyu, who was just a great man for me to be around. And I'll just say that my intensity, I think, was a little off-putting at times at MA. I'm a pretty intense dude, and I think that made some people feel uncomfortable at times. But Koyu was always in my corner. But he did tell me when he was thinking about moving on, he was like, you've talked a whole lot about opening this gym. Mm-hmm. When I get out of here, it might be the time. And I kind of looked at that as like a sign. And I won't go into why, but I said, all right, well, we're going to do this thing, and just kind of jumped out the window. But the benefit was that we had already had a business. So literally we just took the business that we were building in MA and put it in the building we're in now. And I think that was probably 11 years ago or something like that. And we started with just athletes. Coach Fields and Kyle Dennis were the first two people that kind of came over. And we started off really with just high school athletes and a handful of middle school athletes. But we had probably 60 to 80 kids we were training at that time. So it was we're already paying the bills. We already got, coaches. And we started filling in the gaps. We started the youth program for development kids. We started a real middle school program. And that was going really well. And at that point, I realized, that I needed to figure out what's the next evolution of BCI going to look like. So I started hiring coaches. I started hiring mentors. I started joining masterminds. And one of the things that I realized, because I'd go to all these things, like I was the only one running like a sport performance business. Most people were running fitness, and maybe they did some sports too, but they were mostly training adults. And I started to realize, like, man, there's a benefit to this here. I've trained adults before. It wasn't so much my jam at that time, but I was like, we could do this. So we started the Metabolic Blast program, which was designed to be a standalone program for adults where we could train 15 to 25 people at a clip. And that was kind of the easiest way for us to get adults going. And again, that blew up pretty fast just by offering the moms of a lot of the athletes we were training. And that went really, really well. And those first couple years in business were, awesome. It's like I'm living my dream. I'm training, combine guys, NFL guys, like all these things that were like, this is my dream. Like I was really doing it. And that was really big. But I could not feel the success. I didn't feel good at all. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that my oldest daughter was still living in Maryland and not in a great situation. So I ended up fighting for custody of her, which was actually the second time. When I literally first started BCI, I went to get custody of her, and I got joint custody. But this go around, I ended up winning, and I got custody of her. And when she moved in with me, I realized very quickly that I did not own a business. My business owned me. Because it's wake up at 3:45 in the morning, go train people till 6 a.m., come back. I was cooking her breakfast. Then I would take her to school. Then it was back to training people all day. Then it was pick her up to school, take her to the gym or drop her off at home, and then train people to 9 o'clock at night. And then back then I worked every Saturday because we did strongman Saturdays. And Sundays I just laid around and licked my wounds and felt sorry for myself. There was no good. You've probably been there. You've had those weekends.
Yeah,
that's one of the things that I can say for sure is our coaches, they know how to work, and it was the only thing that I knew how to do to make sure we've got the right type of people is make them work. Yeah. And those years were tough. And if I didn't have a child that I knew I needed to be there for, I may have kept going in that direction. But I realized okay, I have to figure out how to really run a business to where if I have another kid or if I have a family one day, I can actually be with that kid. And again, I was very focused on all things training, sports science. I jokingly say I gave myself insomnia because of reading translated Russian training manuals. I would just stay up. I was ate up with this stuff. And to this day, I'm still ate up with it. But there was a big shift when I got custody of Cassidy in how much time I allocated towards studying training versus how much I did towards marketing, sales, fulfillment, and how to really run a business and hiring those coaches. And what I decided at that point, that kind of the purpose now is I want to develop the best gym in the state of Alabama. And I believe we already have that. And I think what I want our members to know is the thought and effort that goes into how and why we do things. The athlete stuff that we do, I mean, you know this, but again, I don't know how many of our members know this. Like, we're respected all over the country and world for what we do. We literally have coaches from all over the country that come to learn from us and inquire about what we do. Because of how long I've been doing this in my network too, I have connections to like literally the best people in the world at what they do. And there are programs of ours like the Development and Fundamentals program that, you know, we've been able to benefit from some of those experts.
Some of the signings we had this past couple weeks.
Exactly. And we've had kids now literally start in that program at 8 years old, go all the way through it and sign Division I Power 5 scholarships. And we've literally trained hundreds of kids that have signed scholarships. Hundreds. That's not an exaggeration at all. We've had over 10 athletes that have started in our program as middle school or high school athletes that eventually become an NFL, NBA, or Major League Baseball player. That is incredibly rare at gyms across this entire country. And that's one of the things we're really well respected for. Now, I always am, I admit, like, geography has a big reason to do with that. We're in an area with good talent. But we've developed a lot of these kids because they started with us so young. So I'm really proud of that. And again, that was like my major focus. But when we got serious about bringing adults back, I did that for one major reason. I felt like that boot camp era was getting a little out of control. So when we started Metabolic Blast, I was like, how do I create like a boot camp-like program that doesn't suck, that doesn't have the same limitations of these other programs? But then all this kind of dovetailed where certain fitness modalities and methods were becoming really popular. And I started to realize, like, oh, wait a minute, we have a chance to develop a program that is better than those methods. And if you don't understand the science behind strength and conditioning, movement as a whole, if you don't understand that really training is about stress management, it's hard to understand why certain training modalities and methods would be non-optimal. But when you know the science and you know the rules, you can build a program that's better than that. And I'm dancing around the fact that, I'll just say it, CrossFit became such a big deal, and so many people, I mean, it's the Kool-Aid. It's what everybody wanted to do.
Yeah.
So for a while, we recognized like there's not a whole lot a point of like competing with that. Like, it just, we'll focus on what we're great at. But once we started getting a little bit more market share and more clients, it was like, okay, now we have a chance to really change the minds of a community on the way to train. So the way that you change anybody's mind over time is through experiences and information. So we had to make sure that we created a good program, hence the development of our hybrid program. And we really had to make sure that we were providing enough knowledge and understanding for people to truly benefit from it. Which, again, is part of the reason why we're doing this podcast, is to fill in more of those gaps. Because I can tell you right now, one of the major benefits of our hybrid program over, like, say, a CrossFit-like program has to do with something called competing adaptations. Whenever you are trying to develop a quality, strength, power, flexibility, mobility, speed, strength, speed, there is a way to drive that adaptation. If what you're trying to do competes with another adaptation, you will marginally adapt to both. Now, that's nerd talk for me saying that the Metcon style of workout that most CrossFit programs are built around, when you're not in shape at all, you'll get results out of it. Once you get in shape, you will marginally adapt, and you'll have to pick a direction that you want to go. So when you're doing Metabolic Blast, the goal is conditioning. It's not about getting strong. It's about conditioning. When you're doing your hybrid strength days, it's about developing strength and power qualities. Simply by separating those days, it allows your body to adapt to one focus at a time. So we knew that that product would be better for people in the fitness community. But getting people to believe that is the challenge.
Yeah.
And we ran into similar issues with kind of other fitness brands that are based around heart rate training and imaginary color zones. And they will literally say their science is one of their benefits, but that's simply not true. It's good marketing. So over time, the burden that has fallen on us and that we want to share with our members is we've got to explain to you guys why what we do is so great.
Yeah.
That's the burden that falls onto us, because those other places create fantastic experiences, and I think that's awesome. And there's a lot that we can learn from how they do those things. Yeah. I think both the fitness modalities, CrossFit, Orange Theory, who I've been dancing around there, I think they do a great job of building community. I think that getting people to exercise is an awesome thing no matter what. But I believe that our programs are superior, and I want our members to know why. And I want them to know that it's not simply a matter of opinion. It really is based on science. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to how BCI got started. But that's from beginning to where we are right now. And we're going to continue to grow. So what's on the table for us here is we're going to continue to grow and expand our offerings here in Madison. And then we're going to be looking to do another facility within 2025. And we're starting all that process now. So appreciate you guys listening to me ramble for the past however long that was. I hope that this has had some value for you guys. Over the next couple weeks, we're going to talk a little bit more about the business itself, and then we're going to start answering questions that you guys have for us. So if you enjoyed this, please let us know. If you hated it, let us know that too. Just be kind with your words. Yeah, so thanks for your time, and send in your questions. You got anything else you want to?
Nah, we're going to be posting this through a YouTube channel. So we're going to post that through the Facebook groups to where you got access to this in future episodes. Just pay attention to the Facebook group, because we will start posting, hey, this next week we may be talking about this. Drop your questions that you may have on this given topic. Because me and Andy plan on doing this pretty consistently. So we would love to hear more of what y'all want to hear us talk about, but there's also some things we feel like we need to make sure that y'all hear. So I appreciate y'all watching the first episode. Stay tuned for the next one.
Peace.